Oh, I got the live notification on YouTube. Oh, I've got to mute that. Oh, it's probably better to, if the password changes and stuff, to invite me on. Oh, well, no, of course, because you don't have my screen up yet. Just think about the stream.
I'm not experienced with Zoom. I don't know the best way to set it up.
So, for me to share my screen, you need to change something in the meeting settings.
I will share via Zoom, not you, was my plan.
Oh, okay. Did you want my screen in any? Oh, Discord for my screen.
Discord, try that.
Yep.
Okay, I have to quit Zoom.
No worries.
To give it OSX permissions.
Yep.
Can you give me meeting lead back or something? Because I can't share my screen right now. Okay, is that working? There's some sort of noise. And also, is the Zoom sharing working? If you're saying words, I can't hear them. Trying again.
Does this work?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Is that good for setup Discord wise?
Yeah. Looks okay. Is the Zoom working?
Yes. I found a thing that does that, but that's not very good.
Okay, so first let's start with some general stuff. So I know some of the context of what you want to learn and where you're at and stuff, but I have a few other questions. You don't have to answer these. You can answer publicly, privately, or just don't answer. Anything's fine. So I'll ask and you can decide what you want to do, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have kids now?
No.
In the foreseeable future?
No.
Okay, why?
Because I am not confident that well, there's two reasons. I'm not confident that I'd be able to dedicate enough time to raise them well, and combined with wanting to do other things currently, I feel like it would be, like, if you tried to optimize when to have kids based on various life factors, it's not now or in the near future for me. So there's
Okay.
better things to spend time on.
Yeah, it's big and hard.
I'm in my late 20s for context.
Okay. Next question was wife.
None. No current relationship.
Okay. Job.
Yes. Well, sort of. It's not a typical employment sort of situation at the moment. Working on projects a little bit between bootstrapping a startup and a normal sort of thing. But I have a lot of flexibility, which is nice.
Is that programming related?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have many friends or much social life?
I've been sort of glad the last few months to have less of it. I have more than I care for most of the time, particularly due to Flux stuff. Uh, so I so yes, probably. In terms of do I have many friends? I tend to. I feel like that's currently a shrinking population, but there's lots and lots of people I know. There's not many people that I spend time with regularly. So
Yeah,
I know that's a bit of a vague answer.
that's pretty common.
The
Okay,
second part of the question, I can't remember. Anyway, if it's not relevant.
that's fine. That was an answer. Okay. You mentioned something about being busier in 2 months. Do you want to say what that was?
I'm happy to tell you about it privately.
Okay. Is it just work stuff or?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Then general stuff. Feel free to interrupt me. Ask questions. Tell me if you're lost, if you don't hear something, if you forgot something, even if I just said it. If it's at all confusing, if you're hesitating, doubting anything. Those are usually
Mhm.
good things to bring up.
I'm not sure if the connection's very good at the moment, by the way.
Did
Seems
you hear
like.
that okay?
So I heard, um, like basically stop you for any questions or if I'm doubting things, etc. Um, and end of the sentence, and then it sort of hung for a bit. It sounded like.
That was it. I think you got it.
Cool.
Okay, so general goals. I understand you have quite a bit of time available to study. So we can do some sessions and then you can work on stuff in between and we can figure out what that should be. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, great. So then part of the point of what we'll do is to learn specific topics like grammar, and then part will be learning about learning.
Yep.
So it'll serve as an example for that. Okay, do you want to jump into grammar stuff, or do you want to talk about some broader things like overreaching?
I'm happy to do either. Um, yeah. I was enjoying the grammar stuff the other day, but have been thinking about overreaching more recently.
Okay, let's try some grammar. So you read the article?
Oh, no, I didn't.
No.
Sorry, I forgot that.
Okay, have you ever studied grammar before?
In early school, yes. We up till sort of grade 8 or thereabouts, out of 12, and then the just the past few days with you. When I say
Okay,
with you, I mean via internet rules, online lessons.
yeah, all right. So do you know what a verb is?
Yep. So I'm familiar with verbs, nouns, not pronouns particularly, except in sort of common usage. I don't know what things like past participles, or whatever that is,
Yeah.
conjunctions, adverbs were sort of the limit of my knowledge, I feel like.
Okay, what about
That, as in,
prepositions?
I didn't understand them. Oh, sorry.
What about prepositions?
Uh, I can guess, but that would be it. Like I know it's a particular type of statement, but I don't know more than that.
Yeah, okay. Um, are you very good with linking verbs or only action verbs?
Linking verbs were somewhat new to me. I feel like I made a few mistakes with them the other day, which probably has helped me get more of an understanding now. But yeah, I haven't mastered them by any means.
Okay. Are you good at recognizing variants of the word is or be? Or is
Probably
that a
average.
problem?
I mean, that's been it's. I don't think it's going to be particularly a problem. However, it was new to me in terms of all of them being treated as the same word.
Okay. I think I forgot one, but there's some of them.
Mhm.
Okay, are you familiar with subject versus object?
Uh, no.
Okay. So the subject is the noun that does the verb, and the object is the noun that is receiving the verb or acted on. So the basic pattern of a sentence is subject, verb, object. In that order in English. The order matters.
Yep.
For example, Joe ate pie. Does that make
Cool.
sense?
Yep.
Okay. So then modifiers, you probably have the general concept. They give extra information about a word.
Yep.
Okay,
I
then
felt
an
like
ad.
understood those the other day.
Okay, yeah. An adjective modifies a noun. An adverb is a modifier for something else. Just anything that's not a noun. The words come up a lot, so it's worth remembering them.
Yep.
Okay, then the next thing is prepositional phrases. These are a type of modifier. They are a bunch of prepositions are a bunch of different little short words like with, to, in, about, of, under, on. Prepositions take a noun, which is called the prepositional object. So you can think of them like a function. Their output is a modifier, and their input is a noun. Does that make sense as a concept?
Yes. Or it will. I might need to give it a moment's thought. But I was thinking about words as functions the other day during the trees thing.
Yeah. I think of verbs kind of like a function as well that take two nouns plus some modifiers, or sometimes one noun, and output a clause or a simple sentence.
So, um, okay. So you would say like in the house, for example, and the whole thing in the house is now a modifier.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, and so another thing about sentence patterns that's very important is I said a preposition takes a noun, but what it really takes is a noun phrase, which is a phrase that can play the role of a noun. For example, the house is two words, and one of them is not a noun, but the whole phrase can act like a noun.
But if you had
So,
inside Big Ben, for example, then that's yep.
so you can throw a bunch of modifiers on a noun, and then the whole group can act like a noun.
Yep. I just realized inside is not a preposition. So, but yeah. In general, anytime we have like a verb, noun, preposition, we can create phrases out of those things as well. So everything has an analogy to like or all of these. I'm not sure what to exactly call them, but all these elements of sentence structure have phrase like attached or associated things.
I don't think they all do, but many of them do, especially verbs and nouns and modifiers. Okay, so there are two main patterns for a simple sentence. And a lot of people think English is really complicated and has a million rules, which is like half true. But if you learn these two patterns, this is like most of English. So you go subject, action, verb, object. The object is optional, so a noun or not anything at all. And the other one is subject, linking verb, complement. The complement is mandatory and it's a noun or an adjective.
Okay, I think I remember you mentioning complements a few days ago.
Yeah, a
And they were
complement
related.
is the thing that gets linked to. So the cat is small, the complement is small. It's just the right-hand side of the linking.
Okay, yep. So it's the input to the. Oh no, is an adverb.
Is a
Not
verb.
a preposition. Sorry, yep, verb.
Yeah, so is takes two inputs. It's an infix operator,
Mhm.
and it takes a left input and a right input, two nouns, and links them together. Plus, it takes optional modifiers like not.
Yep.
Okay, so then this is a simple sentence. This is a sentence with one main verb. So the proper word for those is a clause. A phrase is a group of words that is less than this pattern, something smaller than either of these patterns. And then a clause is one of these patterns. Does that make sense?
Yep. Phrases. We talk about like noun phrases and things, and I've seen in some of the trees that I've particularly of the constitutional camp, they've got like NP all the way up or VPs and things. Is that purely a convenience on their part, and they're actually those things end up being more than noun phrases or verb phrases?
Are you talking about the constituency grammar diagrams?
Yeah. Yeah, constitutional, not constitutional.
Yeah, they put those all over the place because they're trying to say that the parts combine into that type of thing.
Yeah, okay. So it's not that it's strictly necessarily that thing if it's combined from more, but it's a convenient way for them to treat it, and it acts like that thing. In that, all verb phrases have to be less than simple sentences.
Yeah. So they use verb phrase. There's some of these things are a little complicated. So English does not map perfectly to math or formal analysis because it wasn't designed that way. Some things
Mm.
are ambiguous, and there are multiple interpretations about how to think about grammar. But there are usually only like a couple of reasonable ones, if not one. Like most ways of thinking about it are wrong.
Yep.
But verb phrases in particular, there are two standard ways to think about them. One is that they include the object or complement, which is what the constituency grammar people always do, because it fits their model better. And the other way to think about a verb phrase is just the phrase that acts like a verb. So it would just be like the action verb plus some adverbs, but without the object.
Yep. Okay.
So unfortunately, the term verb phrase is ambiguous between both meanings.
Do both of them presume that, or do both of them take phrase to mean the same thing?
Yes, a
Okay.
phrase is less than a clause. So the basic split is subject and verb. That's the main split in the sentence. So if you have both of those, you can have a clause. If you're missing one of them, you're not going to have a clause. It'll only be a phrase. So they take the part of the sentence that is not the subject, and then they call that the verb phrase, the verb half of the sentence.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so another important thing. Most grammar analysis, people start with the subject, and then they find the verb, and then they find the object because it's in order from left to right. Um, However, I think it's generally better to find the verb and to treat that as the most important thing.
Yep.
So here are some practice sentences. Let's try them quickly. Find
So
verb, then subject, and then object or complement.
okay. So the object or complement is I'm just did I note that down?
The right-hand side of the verb.
It's the noun that's not receiving the action. So is the verb, John's the subject, Wise is the complement.
Yeah,
Drank milk is the subject, and John is the complement.
no. So
No,
who's
okay.
doing the
So
drinking?
John. Yep.
Yeah.
Um,
So he's the actor who is doing the verb, which is what the
um,
subject
I
is.
I tried to analyze a sentence the other day where this came up, where I wasn't sure how to interpret. Um, or this was actually, I think the word was try or trying, and I wasn't sure how to interpret either side of it. Um, so I know that's
Do you have an
a problem
example?
for me.
Like,
Um, so I'm in this particular case, I can't remember the question, and I don't think I wrote it down. I did have it was in a browser in a temporary um,
okay,
thing. I can
what
find it,
about
but take some time.
John tried to pass his test? Would you have difficulty with the what the actor is here?
So John's the actor, so pass is the verb, John is the actor, the test is the object. Um,
Actually,
tried,
this is a more complicated
oh,
sentence, and the verb is tried, and this whole thing here is the object, and it uses stuff we haven't gotten to yet.
okay, so um, the so this is actually like directly relevant to the thing, or to I think another thing the other day. The other one I had trouble with, I remember. I'll just write it down so we can come back to it at the right time. Which was a message to the kid who called yesterday. Um, so okay, so for something like trying, because that's describing an attempt at a whole thing, so to pass his test. Did you mention that was a noun phrase?
Yes.
Okay, yep. So yeah, so that's the only way to group that. You couldn't say, oh yeah, this is why passes can't be the verb, is that the left-hand side of pass there, John tried to, doesn't make um, nearly as much sense. You'd need a noun to fit that, and John tried to, I don't think, is a noun phrase.
Yeah, and there isn't an actor doing passing. There isn't
Passing
like a
is in like,
passing action
oh,
that's
I
actually
see what you mean.
happening.
Yep. As in John tried to, even if that was a noun phrase, it doesn't describe. Um, as in John tried to is not able to do the act of passing the test.
Yeah, like he might pass his test, but this sentence is not telling us that that action of passing actually happened.
Yep. Yep. It's describing his attempt, and so without the result of the passing. Whereas if it was
Yeah,
John passed his test. So okay, so because this is in the past tense, the tense of the verbs gives us a way to tell the grouping as well, right? As in tried is in the past, but pass is used in the present sense because that whole noun phrase is the subject of tried, not subject, sorry, object.
yeah. The tenses do help give clues. Um, the to pass is the infinitive form, which is never going to be a main verb.
Okay. Oh, yeah, yep. As in, yep.
Yeah, so tried is a finite verb, which you can call a main verb. It's a verb that can lead a clause or simple sentence. It's one of the verbs you can build a sentence around.
Yep.
And it's in the right form for that. And there's certain attributes associated with that, such as an action actually happening at some time and some subject actually doing the action. Those are some of the main concepts of what makes it a finite or main verb.
So it's sort of like everything about the sentence is resolved with the main verb, but other parts of the sentence do not necessarily need to be resolved.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. The to pass thing is missing some of the information that you normally put with verbs.
Yep.
It's less of a complete thought.
Got it. So
Okay.
that idea of, yeah, more or less of a complete thought is part of the reason I had trouble with the one below, where I sort of broke it into two and I wasn't able to figure out how to merge them.
Okay,
I'm not
so
sure if it's beyond us at the
was
moment,
this part of a sentence or was this the whole sentence?
though. It was the title of a video, so I'm not actually sure if it's a whole sentence, but it read like one.
Yeah, so this is actually a fragment. So the core word here is message. This is the noun, which you would expect to be the subject. But then the other
Okay,
things are all modifiers.
so the thing that occurred to me as you were saying that, so it acts like a sort of big noun phrase,
Yeah.
in that message to the kid who called yesterday is one thing, and implicit in the video title is like, this is my delivery of a message to the kid who called yesterday, and it's then delivery would be the verb, and that's why we can't break this down the same way.
Yes. In the context, you can understand it, even though there's no verb, because you know what sort of thing it would be. So it's a description of the video. So like the video is about, are the implied words, you could say.
Yep.
And then you would
And
have
then
the verb
that would be,
is.
yeah, is, yep. I was going to say be, but that wasn't even, yep, in the sentence, but yep.
Okay, and then to the kid is a prepositional phrase, which forms a modifier. So the to is taking kid as an input and then modifying message. Make sense?
And yeah, and kid is taking the as a, or in the way that we draw a tree.
Yeah,
So that would just
the
be,
is a modifier on kid.
yep.
Okay, and then the who called yesterday is a bit trickier, but it is a modifier.
Okay, so um, I intuitively understand why it's a modifier. Um, I did look into who at the time. So who is a pronoun? Um, so, okay, so if you had, so if it was Max called yesterday, that's a potentially full sentence. But when we replace
Yes.
a noun with a pronoun, it can be a modifier, or it is a modifier. Um,
So not exactly. Most pronouns don't do that. For example, the pronouns he or it are not going to act weird in this
oh,
way.
so yeah, so well, oh, of course, because like she called yesterday, he called yesterday is that's a complete phrase or a complete sentence like Max called yesterday. Um,
Yes.
but
And
yep, okay.
the word who has more than one meaning, so you can also get a complete sentence with who called yesterday. You just put a question mark on the end.
Would that be well? Is that not whom called you? No, it's not. Sorry. Now that I say it out loud. Yep, gotcha.
So in that meaning, who means what or which person or people. Make sense?
Yep.
So pronouns in general are just reference words. They are shortcuts that point at something else.
Hmm.
Normally they're pointing at a specific thing, like he will be pointing at John. However, when you have a question, sometimes they're sort of pointing at a blank because the point of the question is to ask who.
Yep.
The
So,
questions are
and
a
that's
little
the
weirder.
second use there. Oh, well, no.
That was the first
No,
use.
it still is the first use, yep.
Okay, now the second use has this thing called relative pronoun, which it's they're a complicated thing. They may be misnamed. The name doesn't really tell you how it works, but they're sort of like a cross between a conjunction and a pronoun.
Yeah, I'm reading the example here. I think I initially misread it. Like, Joan plays the mouse who married the playboy. The who is taking the mouse, and then married being a verb, but the who, or no, yeah, just married the playboy is the other side of that. Um, or the playboy being the other side, married being the verb, linking the mouse, the mouse idea to the playboy idea. I'm not sure that's a very good explanation of that example.
Yeah. So who does more than one thing? So on the one hand, it refers to the word mouse. So we have mouse married the playboy, basically.
Yep.
So that's the pronoun part of it. And then the thing they call relative is that it's creating this whole clause, and then the clause is being used as a modifier for
On mouse. Yeah.
mouse to tell us which mouse. So in that role, it's similar to a conjunction like and, where you can add an extra simple sentence or clause to your sentence.
Yep. Yep.
So who married the playboy is a complete clause. It has the subject who, which means mouse, and then it also has the verb. Plus, this verb has an object.
Okay, so subjects or subjects happen with any verb, I presume.
Yeah.
Yep, if we have a phrase. Yep. But then it makes a complete clause. I think I've got it.
Yeah, a clause is basically just a subject and a verb, and then the verb might have an object or complement also.
Yeah, okay. Yep. So yep. So the object and the complement are the less important parts.
Yeah, they're seen as a bit less important. Although I don't emphasize that, I just emphasize I use the verb as the root node, and then both the object and subject are children of the verb.
Yep.
Okay, so try this sentence and see if you can figure out what's going on, and let's make a tree for this one.
Okay. Let me see if I can do this. It might be. How well can you see my screen, by the way? It looks like, to me, it looks like you
Yeah,
can't
it's
see.
not very resolution.
So if I like, is this gonna? Oh, it doesn't even seem like it's working now. Okay, that doesn't matter then. Uh, Hold on. I'm just gonna grab tablet because I don't have any particularly good way to do trees. None that I'm like familiar with, essentially, to do it quick enough. Okay, so the sentence is: the ferocious dog chased 3 cats over the chair. So because so so the ferocious dog chased 3 cats would be doable. I like it. That could be a complete sentence, but over the chair,
Mhm.
3 cats over the chair doesn't make sense as a thing. So
Correct.
um, so on the left-hand side, that one's sort of trivial. I'll leave that for the minute. The
Okay, do you know what over is?
That's what I was about to ask. Is the next thing would be, yeah, looking up the definition of over.
Yeah, so getting some dictionaries definitely helps.
I usually just use Google and I found it. Okay, so it's a preposition and an adverb, not a noun, in this case. Um, so, all right, and it's not a preposition. In this case, it's an adverb,
Why?
um, because it is not. Uh, um, so a preposition, I think, in my where's my notes? Um, uh, So a preposition turns something into a modifier. So we've got like, in my example on Google here, I saw flames over Berlin. Flames over Berlin becomes one unit, or can be treated as one unit. And so we've got two different nouns. Um, in this
Mm-hmm.
case, over is describing like the like what ends up happening to uh, the three cats. So um, three cats is the noun. Chair is. Oh wait, no. Okay, so three cats over the chair. No, of course it's the same thing as flames over Berlin. So it's a preposition, not an adverb, which makes a lot more
Yeah.
sense.
So you've got this noun here, chair, that has to go with something. Um, you can think of the standard sentence patterns only allow you to put certain things into a sentence. You can't just like throw in a stray noun for no reason.
Yep.
So if you have an extra noun, that's a sign that you have to figure out what purpose it has or where it fits in.
So, uh, as in the fact that there are too many nouns, sort of thing, in this sentence, is the hint of how we've got to fit them in.
Yes.
There are only some sort of shapes of a sentence that would work for that.
Yeah, so chased is the verb, and it's got its two nouns, dog and cats. And then we have this extra noun, chair. So there has to be some grammatical technique to allow the third noun into the sentence.
So three cats over the chair. Oh no, no. Okay, yep. So that's that three cats over the chair is a noun phrase in and of itself because we could imagine the three cats hovering over the chair or things like that. Um, and because there's no verb, I mean that's why it's a noun phrase because there's no verb. Whereas three cats hovering over the chair could be a complete sentence. Um, oh well, sorry, it's a is it? Yeah, no, it is a noun phrase because chased. The ferocious dog is the subject, and then three cats over the chair is the uh, object. So let's get the tree going, I guess.
Okay, so I disagree with part of that.
Okay, yep.
Uh, so with modifiers, there are a bunch of different ways to tell what they modify. Word position is one. For example, adjectives usually go before nouns, such as red, car. The position of the adjective red helps you know what it's modifying. You could have a bunch of other nouns in the sentence somewhere else, and you would know red applies to car just because it's right next to it on the left.
Yep.
Adjectives tend to be relatively easy that way. Prepositional phrases frequently go right after a noun.
Um, I need to remember what prepositional phrase is.
So, for example, the car on the street. On is one of the prepositions.
So on is, and essentially that's the root node of that um, clause or phrase that we're analyzing.
This is just a phrase. There's no verb here.
Yep. Um,
So
okay.
here, the position of the modifier on the street, it's giving us more information about the car. And the fact that it is directly to the right of the car is one of the hints that tells us what it applies to.
Yep.
Um, Verbs, the modifiers for verbs go in more places than the modifiers for nouns. They get spread out more.
Okay. Yep. Um,
So They
Yep.
often can go at the start of the sentence, the end of the sentence, or the left or the right of the verb. Those are the most common places.
Okay, so this is modifiers for verbs. So um, say we had like quickly jumped. Um,
Yep.
so we could have like quickly I jumped through the hoop, or I quickly jumped through the hoop. I jumped quickly through the hoop, or I jumped through the hoop quickly.
Yep.
Cool.
So with verb modifiers, you have to look at context more. You have to think about what thing in the sentence would it make the most sense if this applied to.
Yeah, okay. So you've got to, so the verb modifier, there's less information included about what it applies to um, intrinsically
Um,
in its position, whereas with
yeah,
noun modifiers, they're the lower order of precedence, um, which means that they're more information.
yeah. So noun modifiers usually are in a row to the left and right of the noun.
Um, so before is easy, but after the noun, um, what's an example of a noun modifier being after the noun?
Sword of smiting.
Oh yeah, yep, okay, yep, gotcha.
The ones after are frequently prepositional phrases because we don't
Um,
say like sword sharp in English. In general, you
uh,
can't just throw adjectives after.
of is a preposition then?
Yes.
Yep, okay. So we had before a preposition takes a noun phrase and turns it into a modifier, but smiting is or sword is the noun, and then or is it of? No, 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 because the um can we see
Uh,
this in both ways? Can we see sort of and of smiting both as relevant things
no.
here?
Um, the noun for a preposition is almost always to its right.
Uh, okay, okay, yep.
So there's just a major word order clue for these.
So yeah, okay. So a preposition groups to the right. Okay, no, that's typically.
Yeah.
I think I've got that.
So smiting is it's a concept. So it looks like a verb because it's related to smite, but we're actually talking about the concept of smiting rather than someone actually doing the action.
Oh yeah, 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 yep. I've got it. So is that that's just like an abstract use of the word as opposed to a concrete use of the word?
Yeah, kind of.
Um, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure of the particular things there, but as in one of them is describing all smiting, and one of them is describing a particular action, like a particular act of smiting at that time. Like Max
Yes.
was smiting the bunnies.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay, so then verb modifiers. Generally left or right of verb or start or end of clause.
Okay, yep, yep. And that was our quickly example before.
Context helps. Yes.
Is it possible then to, or maybe my example before is good enough to tell, to have a verb modifier that is so far away from the thing that it's actually relating to? Um, I mean, essentially, you could like a verb modifier allows you to break up that um, verb phrase possible. Uh, just so I'm don't make the mistake. Like a verb phrase, can that be a complete sentence as well? Like a sentence's verb phrases if we take verbs as the root?
A verb phrase or any phrase is not a complete sentence.
Okay, yep.
So it's going to be missing the subject.
Yeah, okay. And if it was missing the object, that would be a um uh oh that would be a noun modifier, but it would be on the object.
A verb without an object is sometimes correct and sometimes it's just incomplete. But you can still have a verb phrase, meaning the verb plus its adverbs.
Okay. All right. I think I probably jumped a bit too many leaps there at once.
Yeah, that's okay. So, going back to this sentence, um, you have to figure out what over the chair refers to. And there
Oh,
are,
it's referring to the chasing, right?
yeah, that is what I think. So I was going to say there are three candidates for what it could possibly refer to in this sentence. They are the verb and the nouns.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it could
So
refer to dog, chased, or cats are the only things that would make sense.
yep. Yep. And so I initially had cats. I think just because of grouping, but it could just as easily have been the dog. There's no reason it didn't. It needed to be any particular one of them.
So when you have a modifier for the subject, you usually put it near the subject. So before the verb, preferably. So
So when
if
you have
over the chair was supposed to refer to the dog, that would be weird, confusing, and hard to follow.
yeah, okay. So that's the least acceptable way of structuring a sentence. If you wanted to talk about the dog, this is one of the worst ways to do it.
Yeah, but just in general terms, if you're looking at what it can apply to, you can say, well, it could apply to the nouns or the verb as a starting point. And then if it applied to this one, that would be bad.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, yeah. So you can think of the chase as happening over the chair, and that makes sense conceptually. It's giving us information about the location of the chase.
Yes. Yep. So that's the most general way of thinking about the sentence. Whereas like three cats over the chair is more particular. It tells us nothing about where the chasing is happening, and if the cats were magic, then this could be, anywhere. Whereas if chased is the thing being modified by, sorry, is the oh, I've forgotten the term. But if chased is the thing that over is referring to, so if the preposition is a verb modifier, um,
Yeah, adverb.
this makes the sentence the most specific it can be out of those three options.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes the best
Except,
sentence. It communicates the best. I agree with that.
yeah. I mean, I feel like actually even the dog, like as in if dog was if over was modifying dog, then that would possibly be more specific than over modifying the cats. Um, uh, just because three cats over the chair. If that, oh, actually, I'm not sure if we can interpret that as magic cats that would like as one unit, like three cats hovering over the chair in this case. But in any case, we definitely I understand the verb modifier thing we were just talking about.
Okay. So you can probably make the tree for this now.
Yep. So, um, oh, um, so we've got the ferocious dog chased three cats over the chair. Um, over has to be under chased. Uh, so over the chair. So, um, and over the chair is one unit because it's acting as the verb modifier. So
Yep.
we have something like that. Um, and then so over is a verb modifier. However, the ferocious dog chased three cats is a thing of its own. And so we've got um, cats, three, um, dog, and then I guess both the and ferocious are just sibling nodes, sort of like this. Um,
Yes, those are both separate modifiers for dog.
because we could have ferocious dogs in general. And so the is only, yeah, the is like is specifying just the dog. Ferocious is also just talking about, like, it's describing potentially abstractly dogs in general that are ferocious, but in this case, the combination of the two being siblings gets us the sort of like an Euler diagram or Venn diagram type thing.
Okay, so do you know how to turn this into an S expression? Is that something you're already too
Oh,
familiar
as
with
in
from
S
programming?
expressions being the Lisp syntax that
Yes.
you were doing the other day. Let me give it a go because it'll be quick if I do know what I'm doing.
Okay.
So, no, I don't need to move that. Um, chased. It actually didn't I? Oh, that's not gonna be good. Do you know what? Oh, I'm just gonna ignore it. So yeah, okay. So that's, I think, the S expression. Can you read that there? Yeah.
Yeah, I can read it fine.
I'm not sure about ordering any of these. No, it's not the S expression because chair the is a thing. So that's closer.
Okay, good. Yeah, I saw that. In terms of ordering, in general, keep everything in the same order as the original sentence when you can. That tends
Yep.
to be
So
best.
here because the is, I'm not sure if the acts as a modifier, but well, I think it
Yes.
does act as a modifier, but it's not. That's not the name of the type of thing it is. Um, yeah, so it's modifying chair, so that makes sense. Both of these, however, are modifying dog, and that's why it
Yes.
reads the ferocious, which is the same order as the sentence, but chair the. Yep, just because that part looks weird by comparison to, but it's actually this part that is the similarity between the two.
Okay, great. So, more about modifiers. Sometimes they're ambiguous. Sometimes you have to make judgment calls about what the author meant. Um,
Mhm.
the grammar is not, it's not a formal grammar where everything exactly maps to a tree. You have to try to think about what makes sense and hope it's clear enough.
Is that to say that there are no formal grammars for modifiers that we can use, or just in general,
Just
in terms of
English
English?
isn't.
Okay, yeah. Are there ways we can restrict our grammar to be formal in that regard?
Yeah, people have like tried to develop formal grammars and stuff. I'm sure there's some way you could make everything use a limited subset of English to avoid ambiguities. Sounds possible. I
It
haven't
might be
researched
boring to
it.
read, though.
I mean, if you really wanted, you could present your sentences as trees or S expressions.
That, yeah, would surely make for gripping writing.
Okay, and then there's a very common ambiguity that doesn't really matter much, and I think that's why it's ambiguous, is because it doesn't really make a difference, so no one cares. Which is, does this
It's usually
modifier...
obvious.
It's not
Oh,
that it's
sorry.
obvious, it's just that both meanings are basically the same thing.
Yeah, okay.
So the issue
We don't
is...
really.
Go ahead.
I was going to say we don't really have like our interpretations about the ferocious dog chasing three cats over the chair. Um, if over is not a verb modifier, we're still imagining something in a kitchen or a dining room or something like that. So for all intents and purposes, people don't use they don't misuse that structure to mean the particularly weird things it could mean. They're always talking about something pretty close to the intuitive reading of it with either expression, with either interpretation.
Yeah, and this sentence isn't very bad. Like this one I'd consider pretty clear.
Yep,
But in the wild you'll find much worse ones, just uh, up to and including ones that are just wrong.
yep, yep.
Okay,
Well,
but
that Does this, so sorry, one thing that I notice occasionally is people will use, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but people use things in such a way that the actual, like the sentence actually reads like not what they intend. Oh, it's hard to think of an example, but say it was something to do with there were two nouns in the first half of the sentence, and the way that they've written it actually refers to the second noun and not the first. Without a concrete example, I don't think it's going to make much sense to ask if these are the same problems. Is what we were just talking about.
People often rely on people sort of knowing what they mean,
Yep,
and
doing the
they're
guesswork and the error correction
yeah,
instead of putting the effort in up front.
yeah, and they say a lot of stereotypical or conventional things. So the more you're trying to communicate some information that is already in the other person's head, the fewer bits of information you actually have to get across for them to get it.
Yep.
So I think a lot of people don't actually communicate very many bits of information. They're just relying on the person already having most of the information.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so
I noticed.
Go ahead.
I notice myself doing that a lot when you get halfway through a sentence and essentially sort of start nodding and mumbling and whatever else because the other person knows what you mean, and you just carry on because it's a waste of time saying the second half of the sentence.
Yeah, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Sometimes they don't know what you mean as much as they think they do.
Hmm.
Because there's definitely times where they completely know what you mean, but there's other times where people are just nodding along and they don't actually know what you mean. That's also fairly common.
Oh yeah, I usually don't end the sentence if I don't trust them to know what it means. But most of the examples I can think of are pretty mundane anyway.
Yeah, I think in general people are too trusting with that stuff.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so back to modifiers. There's a common issue that comes up that's ambiguous, which is, does this modifier modify the verb, or does it apply to the entire sentence? Well, by sentence I mean simple sentence or clause.
Oh, okay. So over, or the question of over, is it describing the uh is there a simple sentence that we can do there, like in the
Yeah,
so yeah, oh of course, because I mentioned that earlier, that makes a complete unit, right? The forest dog chased three cats. So uh so the difference between the two in this case though, like
the
if over
meaning
is
comes
just
out the same either way, really.
okay, yeah,
Like it's going to be the same chase scene either way. I
yep,
wasn't even thinking of this as an example, but it is, where you could think of over the chair as applying to the whole rest of the clause, and that would make sense. So that should be the other candidate when we're looking at a modifier. Because before, the candidates we looked at were the verbs and the noun.
yep.
But you can also throw in the entire clause.
So
Or,
that acts as a verb. Oh no, of course it's not a verb phrase because it's not a phrase. But yeah. This goes back to my question before: can all sentences be verb phrases? They're similar, but not the same.
and sometimes it'll apply to multiple clauses as well. So you can think about that. It can apply to a one clause or the entire sentence with multiple clauses, or sometimes it could apply to like two clauses but not the third one.
Yep.
Um, so if you're going to do the tree diagram and you thought that it applied to the entire thing, would you edit your tree diagram? Where would you put it?
Okay. So um, I would basically over becomes the new root. So I don't know if this is going to be easy enough to do. No. Okay. Um,
Well,
oops. Deselect. Like that would be the equivalent where you'd have the ferocious dog chase three cats as the simple sentence.
okay, hold on. So you have over as the parent and chased as the child, right?
Yeah, which doesn't make sense for if we're using verbs as roots of sentences.
Okay, but another way to look at parent-child is the child is the modifier of the parent, right?
Yep, yep.
But what we really want here is for over to be a modifier of a bunch of stuff, right? So
Uh,
because it's a
yes, yep.
modifier, it should be the child of something.
So, oh, yeah, yeah, okay. So instead of like that, it's actually, I don't know how we'd group it, but it's actually the child of like this entire thing. I don't know how we'd put that in the tree though, because it just comes back under chased, right?
Yeah, so there are two ways you can do it. One is you can draw a big circle around a subtree and then make a child of a circle,
Oh, that didn't work.
which is
Um,
not, standard tree stuff, but there's nothing wrong with it if you want to do it that way.
it's clear at least.
Yeah. And the other option, which is what I normally do, is when I want to attach something to a group or a subtree, I find the root node of that group and I attach it to that.
So in that case, that just comes out exactly the same as what we were already doing though, right?
Yes.
Um, yeah. So, okay, yeah. So that's the, is it always the case that, so with a simple sentence like this, when over is, the child of chaste because it's modifying chaste directly. No, we talked about that's ambiguous. So although they are like essentially represented the same in terms of the tree structure, if we simplify out any circles like this, um, the meaning is still ambiguous.
So, yeah, the meaning is a tiny bit ambiguous, but they're basically the same concept either way. The reason it comes out so similar is that the action is sort of the main point of the sentence. So if you modify the action, you are modifying like the thing that's going on in the sentence. You're modifying like the main thing.
Yeah, and
So
that's
that
why
kind of affects everything. Because everything's
and that's why
involved in
the
the action.
yep, uh, why the cases for ambiguity are not really paid attention to, because it's very rare to actually end up with a substantial difference, because if you modify the central verb of the root verb of a sentence, then it's not surprising that it comes out to mean nearly the same thing.
Yeah. So you can
Cool.
understand a difference in terms of trees, but it doesn't particularly matter in general.
Yep. Cool.
Okay, so that was a brief overview of part one, which is about clauses.
Yep.
So part two gets into complex sentences, which are sentences with multiple clauses. They can have multiple verbs and conjunctions. So you take a simple sentence like, the cat went home, and you add a conjunction, and then you add another simple sentence, the dog peed.
So
And
I was just thinking. Oh, um, I was just going to bring something up while we're changing to part two. Uh,
yeah, go ahead.
which was just if because I neglected to read this beforehand. Did we want to talk about any overreaching stuff this session? Um, and if so, is that a good way to use the last chunk of it?
It could go either way. Either way is fine.
Okay. Oh, we're on grammar. Let's keep doing that.
Okay.
So I think or my intuition is that I've got a decent understanding of conjunctions, but I don't know how I'd validate that.
Okay. So conjunctions can do two things. They can join two phrases together, or no, actually not two things, but conjunctions join things together, and they join two things that are the same type or level. So you can join a clause with a clause or a phrase with a phrase, but you
But not a
don't
phrase with
join
a
a
clause.
phrase with a clause.
Gotcha.
So you need some level of parallelness.
Yep.
And
Is is there a term for like sort of the same level of emergence that are not used in the BOI, wait. But same level of emergence at a sentence structure?
I don't know a good one.
Okay. But I understand what you mean about they're sort of logical siblings.
Yeah, so you can take some individual nouns like cat, dog, and pig, and you must be familiar with this. You can make lists rather than just connecting two things. So you can add a bunch of stuff.
Yep.
Duck, chicken.
Yeah. No, I feel quite strongly about the Oxford comma, so that that part I get definitely.
Oh, I'm not a fan of Oxford commas in general. My opinion is if it's unnecessary, then it's generally should be left out.
I think it's easier to make the mistake if you leave it out because you might not consider when things are necessary, and so because it's low overhead, it's always worth the cost of inclusion. I think is my because I've seen people say things ambiguous when they don't mean to be, and so you need less mental resources on your own stuff if you always put it in. I think is my argument, why I like it rather.
Yeah, well, it's not that big a deal. You can write them.
Yep.
Okay, so clause is a complete thought. So it has a subject and a verb. You have like a actor and an action. A phrase is an incomplete thought.
Yep. So I'm just moving windows.
And then conjunctions join things. Oh, actually, that reminds me. I was going to go look at the preposition part briefly. And because you're having some difficulty recognizing prepositions, and I want to see if I had a good idea about how to say what they are besides just getting used to
Yeah.
them and like learning examples.
I was going to ask what the root of, like, as in the etymology of preposition was earlier.
Origin, from before and to place. So yeah, it's just a thing that goes before.
Um,
So it's not really a useful etymology.
no. Well, it's sort of, I guess it makes it as prepositional. No, but that sort of does because, like, I find that I miss, like, what do you call it? Things like that when the pronunciation is incorrect, like demonstrably being more about monsters than demonstrating. So it is actually useful to see.
Okay. But it doesn't like explain the content of them, like sort of what they do. It's
No,
just
yeah.
like they go there and they're sort of like utility words.
So, okay. They relate a noun to something else in the sentence. So they have to be
Yeah.
relative to something, which makes sense.
Yes.
Um,
You end up with a modifier.
okay, yep. All right, yeah. So they're just in the spot before the noun to make a noun a modifier. Is
Okay, so this is maybe my best attempt to explain it. They're expressing a relationship, such as in, between some part of the sentence and some additional information. And the additional information is always a noun phrase.
okay. The additional information is well, I mean, in terms of prepositional as a word, prepositional, the additional phrase is the subject, essentially, acting on the object on the left. That's like backwards compared to the way the sentence is structured. But anyway, it occurs to me as a funny way to read it. So yeah, so to the park is operating on the park, and is then essentially in the mathematical analogy, it's creating a function that then um, it's not creating so okay, yeah, because went uh, is the verb. Um,
Yeah.
John's the subject, and to the park, well, the park is the object. Um, is
The,
the
the
object
park is
is
the object of to, which is a preposition.
okay, yeah, and then to the park is the object of went.
To the park is an adverb. It's a modifier on went rather than the
Oh, okay,
object of
yep.
went.
Sorry, yeah, objects aren't used in normal, or when, just in terms of verbs, John jumped. I'm just trying to think because then, like, through the hoop from before, that's like through the hoop is then, um, through is acting like to. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, okay, I'm not sure
John
there's a question
jumped
there.
through the hoop. That's a prepositional phrase again with through.
Yep. Is that the same? I mean, you've got the examples with to in about of. Or then there's before as well. So it sounds like there's a lot of uh, prepositions.
Yes, there are a bunch of them. You can look up a list and skim through it to get a sense of it. A lot of them are short words. So, to the park cannot be the object of went because to the park is not a noun. Prepositional phrases are always going to be modifiers, so they can't go in a noun slot in the sentence.
Yep, gotcha.
Okay, so we were at conjunctions. There are two types of conjunctions. There are coordinating conjunctions and subordinating conjunctions. You can think of these as peer conjunctions, where the two things are approximately equal that are being joined, and master-slave conjunctions, something where they're unequal. One
So
is clearly the parent and the other one's the child.
when we talked the other day, or when you were with Internet Rules, and we had the simile, or I like my women like I like my coffee, like was a subordinating conjunction.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Yep. Whereas with like an if you have, well, actually, so something like but as the coordinating conjunction there. I mean, my intuition is that but has order to it. I guess it sort
It
of
does.
isn't because it's. Oh, it does. Okay.
Like
Oh,
the
but
order
the
matters. The left, it's asymmetric. The left and the right of the but are different.
but the two things on either side are like peers or siblings in more ways than with subordinated conjunctions, where there's more freedom for to use different levels um of I, of clauses.
Yeah. So these things they're not perfect, but that's just an approximation. That subordinate clauses are less important and coordinate clauses are about equally important.
Yeah, okay.
Um,
As in it's and when we say important here, we mean that the importance of the before and after parts of that sentence to the meaning of the sentence are equal, whereas with subordinating conjunctions, you could drop off the latter part and maybe still have something that makes sense. Um,
yes.
the thing that immediately comes to mind is that and which. And the rule that I looked up the other day for it was this is something like 2 weeks ago, I think, but uh, is something like when you use the like that, the second part is essential to the sentence. However, when you use which, you could drop which and the rest of the sentence. Um, one of the reasons I bring that up is I don't see that or which as examples of conjunctions, but they feel like that rule feels very similar. Sorry, that was a few ideas at once. Um,
Yeah. So the word that is one of the hardest and most debated words.
okay.
The way it works, it's definitely kind of like a conjunction, and people disagree about the best way to think of it and represent it. So
Okay.
there's different schools of thought on that. And
Is
it is a word
which
with many different meanings. So some of them are easier than others. And the that versus which thing is normally about relative clauses. And as a rule of thumb, yeah, you use that when you want a modifier that is essential to the meaning of the sentence, and you use which for inessential stuff. But that's only a rule of thumb. It's not a hard requirement.
okay, cool.
It was advocated by Fowler and some other people.
It sounds like it's becoming the norm type thing, but no one can technically say you're wrong if you use the other way. It's not incorrect to use it in the uncommon way, I mean.
Okay, so you can think of a conjunction as a function that takes some stuff, and all the stuff has to be the same type, and then it joins it together.
Yep.
And the conjunction and is the most symmetric one, the most fair joining. And then the other ones are varying degrees of asymmetric and giving different treatment to the different arguments.
Is it a rule that with subordinating conjunctions the latter appearing clause is always the lesser?
No, you can swap the order. So we have John sang after John 8. So in this one, this is the main clause, John sang, and then after John 8 is a little bit like a modifier that's telling us about when he sang.
Yep. And because it's a modifier in the sentence, that means that it's less important in our way of thinking about importance at the moment.
Yeah, so this is the subordinate clause. However, you can write after John 8, John sang. So you can swap the order and add a comma.
Before, when you said subordinate clause, you selected after John 8. Is after John 8 a clause? Or because after being treating as sort of a pseudo function in this regard, it's missing one of the inputs, right? So isn't just John 8 the clause?
So that's one of the things people debate. You could do it either way.
I've heard it like in terms of discussions about like what's the simple sentence possible. Something like Bill ran has been the best that I've heard. So that would feel like if that was going to be a clause, then John 8 could be a clause, which
there's definitely
but
nothing wrong with John 8 as a clause. The thing people debate is whether the conjunction should be included in the clause. So it's related to the overall divide is, should you use conjunctions as parents of two things, like or should you use conjunctions like modifiers? So thing one and thing two. So these are the two basic models.
okay, yep. So yeah, I can see both of them there.
Yeah, so in the second model, you would say that the clause is and thing two. They would include the conjunction in the clause. They would say that it is like leading the clause and
Is it
but in the left model, you would have your child 1 clause and your child 2 clause, and neither of them would have the word and in it, and the word and would just sort of be floating in between the clauses.
is it in general we can add a like a conjunction, fill in the second half, and then it's both a modifier and a complete clause still?
Yeah, so it's those are called dependent clauses though, because you can't make a sentence on its own with them. Like after John 8,
Yeah.
cannot stand on its own as its own sentence. You have to put it with some other clause.
So it could be a reply, for example, but
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense out of context. It occurs to me that and John 8 is not a reply to the same sorts of questions. I don't know if and John 8 can be useful, but after John 8 can. Are I've forgotten the types. Is the second type of conjunction more versatile then than the first?
No,
I
I
mean, so
wouldn't say that.
thing two, it's a so we've got this like that special clause that we were talking about. I forgot the name that you mentioned just now.
Relative
I can
clause?
see how. Sorry.
Relative clause?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. As
those
in, it has
work
to be.
like those work with like the right-hand model.
Yep. Yep. I'm just thinking about how. So in the way that like after John ate, can be a reply to the question, when did John eat? Or sorry, when did John do blah? Um, it so it can make sense in that context. It's some of the other conjunctions don't. Um, so, but I think with that sort of thing, it sort of it doesn't make as well. If we no, then they're actually in terms of the left and right diagram that you had up there. Um, so uh, like oops, I can turn this back on. Uh, no, 8 is, yeah.
So here's
So
the two
like,
models applied to this particular sentence.
um, yeah. So the question, when did John sing, is essentially like, I mean, whether we take out John sang as the uh, like as child of after or as the parent of after. If we like the question, when did John sing, the remainder nodes are identical.
Yeah, we're just swapping around a particular relationship, and then most of the stuff stays the same, which is good.
Yep.
Most of the stuff has some sort of stability or independence. The way it works locally, it holds together when you look at the bigger picture, so you don't have to change your local analysis of most stuff when you look broader.
I can imagine that the using after as the root in this case um, is more general than using sang as the root because uh, after accepts a well oh so I mean potentially any clause maybe but so after accepts a clause in the first slot um, it might become ambiguous when the clause is, or the tree diagram might be harder to draw when the clause is more complex. Like the more complex that left-hand clause, figuring out where to put it is going to be like which verb it's sort of under is more difficult and maybe less clear. Whereas if you have the conjunction as the root of both uh, sides of the tree, it feels like it's going to be more clear.
I'm not sure. I think both models can work. The right model does have an extra layer. It's nested a little bit more.
Hmm.
So if it's getting complicated, then more nesting also makes it more complicated, so that can build up and be hard.
Yep.
But I think it's best to be familiar with both models and be able to think about it either way, have them both make sense to you. I think they both have value.
Yeah, I can see the way that you'd like transform between the two. I'm not sure about more complex sentences. I can't think of like nothing comes to mind as an example, but I can see how this works in this case.
Yeah, so what people usually do, just some approximation, uh, most people seem to treat coordinating conjunctions with the left model and subordinating conjunctions with the right model.
Because of the different like importance of each, the before
Yes,
and after.
so the left model works well with the word and. And is the word that most likes the left model, and it makes the most sense.
Yep.
And the coordinating conjunctions are the word and plus the conjunctions that are kind of most similar to and.
Sort of interchangeable. So in the same way that you can often replace and with but, and the sentence. I mean, obviously the meaning changes, but the sentence is still balanced. It's not
Mm-hmm.
the case with the or it changes far more radically with the subordinated conjunctions if it's still valid or still makes sense. I can see a lot of why that would be the case as well because it like with and the symmetry of the tree feels like the symmetry of the sentence. You could say A and B or B and A and it's equivalent.
Yeah.
Whereas with after it makes it's far more meaningful for to have that as a unit because it's relating the two in a non-symmetric way. Yep.
Yeah. So, but also what people normally do is not actually consistent and they don't understand the trees or what they're doing very well, which makes it more confusing.
So even in grammar and like people doing parsing trees are inconsistent about it. It's not like, always
I didn't mean the
the
people
subordinate.
actually making trees. I meant just
Okay, okay, yep.
people teaching grammar in general. Also, dictionaries.
Yep.
I've looked stuff up in dictionaries and they're pretty inconsistent. Not just with each other,
Yeah.
but with themselves.
I can imagine that that would be a pretty easy case to fall into if you weren't rigorous. Like when you were looking up the other day and when we had all these circular definitions, until we got to
Oh, yeah.
part, I think was the, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so I cover this in my grammar videos stuff. This particular issue, I've got some info about it as well.
Oh, yep, the ones on Gumroad.
Yeah. It's very briefly in the article, but not very much, I think. And then there's more in the videos.
Cool.
And those also have relative pronouns and relative clauses, like who, covered.
Yep.
Okay, so this is pretty important. Let's look at this briefly. Um, why do we use conjunctions and combine our clauses into bigger, more complicated sentences? Why don't we just have one idea per sentence and make new sentences over and over?
Yeah, it's word soup is sort of the thing that comes to mind with the first one. It's just a bunch of, it doesn't necessarily, so it doesn't make clear that any of this has to do with each other. I
Yeah.
could, yeah.
Yeah, so the conjunctions uh, help you know the relationship between things. They give you information, like a because relationship is different than a while relationship or an after.
The on in this case, elephants have faces, elephants have trunks. Yeah, okay, so not all of these simple sentences are being connected with conjunctions. We don't need them to be necessarily because we're simplifying because they have trunks on their faces includes less information than elephants have faces and elephants have trunks. Presuming that
Yeah,
the trunks
we
being on their
did,
faces is implicit.
from a pedantic perspective, when we simplified it, we lost a little bit of information, although we did also add some information.
My intuition is that we added more because the information that we lost was lost because it was redundant, not because it was so the extra information in the first example is sort of if it was the case that we were talking about everything, then there's a lot of redundancy in that like in that collection of sentences. Whereas if this was literally as general as possible, well, if it was as general as possible, we wouldn't be able to like connect them like this. Um, it's only because of the redundant information in the first one, and presuming that was the meaning, that we could do this.
Okay, so people, however, they take this way too far, and like they'll make sentences that are as long as this whole thing or longer.
So that's one of my like really big problems is that I'll have a like not even like the paragraph immediately under that I've written sentences that long, and only when I get to the end do I realize, and I basically go in and remove conjunctions and stuff where they're not adding value
Uh-huh.
as the first step of simplification.
Yeah. In general, you want to combine things into the same sentence when they're closely related.
Hmm.
And you still have to split it up if you have too many closely related things. If you have too many things that are closely related, then you go to a finer level of detail. And then you see if what's still closely related when you're zoomed in more.
Yeah, okay. I'm just taking some notes as a uh, like reflection of myself thing.
Yeah. You want to try to look at your what you're writing at a level of detail where you put the closely related stuff in the same sentence and you put the pretty closely but not quite as closely related stuff in the same paragraph. And then you actually get good sentence and paragraph lengths. If your lengths are coming out too, if it's all choppy and your lengths are too short, or if you have run-on sentences and very long paragraphs, then that is an indicator of looking at the wrong level of detail. Not the only problem, but it's one of them.
So in that case, it would be trying to deal with too big of a concept as one unit. And it's an
Yeah,
indicator that you need to break up that concept into multiple concepts, and deal with each of them individually.
yeah. So if you're thinking about the content that you're writing about as a tree with a hierarchy, with the main topic on top, and then you have lower levels that are more detailed, then you can go up or down in the tree until you find the right place to map to sentences or paragraphs.
Yep. So you've got to basic routing between any 2 points indicates every idea that you have to go through to get there, and there not only are they the opportunities to break it up, but it also means that if you've got two things next to each other that like are on opposite sides of the tree, like that's a really big red flag that the sentence is like really jumbled up as well. Um,
Yeah,
which I imagine jumbled sentences are easier to do when you are trying to deal with too much at once, because inside that uh, idea, maybe it doesn't matter too much where it is, but for communicating it, you've got to, yeah, it obviously matters way more to break it down into the, uh, yeah, into sort of, well, in essence, into subtrees, as opposed to having like a big jumbled graph. Yep, all right. I think that was a bit rambly, but I think I've got it.
okay. So part 3 gets into verbals, references, and implied words. Verbals are tricky. These are words that are based on verbs, but they're not playing a verb role. There are
They're
three
not playing
types.
a,
They're not playing a verb
oh,
role
okay,
in
yeah,
the sentence. They're not
yeah.
a
Yep.
main verb or a finite verb, if you want to be more particular. So, um, when you have a clause and we say a clause has a subject and a verb, they're not that type of verb. So they're related to
Yep.
verbs, but they don't do that type of role. So a gerund plays a noun role. They end with ing. So, for example, playing is fun.
Yep.
Playing is based on the verb play, but here it's a noun referring to the general concept of playing. It
Um,
isn't attached to a particular actor doing the playing or a particular point in time.
it's the yeah, okay, so it's actually yeah, so it is a noun because we're talking about the abstract concept of doing play. Um,
Yeah,
play being its own thing. Yep, okay. Do, so when we use doing in the way that I just used do there, um, do is that like is? No. Um, what is do? I don't know. We can come back to that later if it's
I
um
it's used in questions a lot, like do you want to? Some verbs are helper verbs that often go with other verbs.
so do you want to, I mean, you could say is it red? Just think about is on the thing there. Um, I'm trying to figure out whether do is an adverb. Um, or no, because is a verb. Sorry, not an adverb. Is do itself a verb? It doesn't. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah,
so
it's
you can
got
have
verb there.
like
Yep.
Joe does a lot of work.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yep. Um,
So then you have
work
a standard verb usage of it.
is work a verbal there? Like Joe does a lot of work is describing not the
Yeah,
not the idea of a job, but like the process of doing work, like you describe work in physics or something.
yeah. Work there is a noun.
Oh, okay. Yeah. But work can also be a verb, right?
Yes.
But all verbals are nouns in the sentence, right?
Gerunds are nouns. There's three
Oh,
types of
Garens.
verbals.
Okay, yeah. So although work is a noun anyway, in the uh, does work example, it's also acting as a gerund or a gerund.
I think it might just be that the word work has a noun definition.
So, yeah, okay. It's a bad example for figuring that out. All right,
Gerunds
I'll come back to that if
mostly
we.
or maybe always end with ing. So working would be the gerund. I think work is just we have a noun. It's just added to the dictionary.
Okay. Trying to think of any other examples. Uh, like a jump as opposed to jumping. I mean, they are different things. Like jumping is a so even if it yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah,
So gerunds always have like they're a noun based on a verb. It's a verb is turned into a noun by adding the ing, which is the present sense of the idea of doing the thing, um, as an abstract concept.
that is a common way they work. So
Cool.
one of the weird things about verbals, though, is they keep some of the attributes of verbs.
Okay. Yep.
Uh, So, for example, here we have playing sports is fun. Um, a regular noun could not just have the word sports after it.
Table
Um,
sports is fun. Yeah. No, it makes no sense. Yep. That's
so the reason you can have sports here is because play partially acts like a verb, so it can take an object as an input.
okay. Yeah. So gerunds are the special case of nouns where they take something as input, but they don't need it. They take an optional parameter as input. They take an optional noun as input.
Yeah, so some verbs have an optional object. I think some might require an object and some can't have an object. It depends on the verb.
Uh, it's an object because it's the thing receiving the verb,
Yes.
and in the idea of just a gerund and an object, there's no subject in that thing. Um, in the is there a subject in playing sports is fun? Fun is the subject. Um, is
No,
it?
fun is the
No.
complement. It's the right-hand side of the link. The left-hand side is the whole thing playing sports.
Is there
So,
a subject to that sentence?
yeah. So, in playing is fun, is the subject clear to you?
Um, so playing is the subject, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Fun is yeah. Yep.
So
A property of
here,
playing.
it's basically the same sentence, but playing is, we have more information about it. This is kind of like a modifier.
Okay. So it looks different because it's like they're both on the right hand side of the gerund, but sports is the object. Um, playing is the subject. No. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sports is only an object of playing. Fun is the object of playing or playing sports. Um,
Yeah, fun is the
yeah.
object of
Ultimately.
is.
Oh, sorry. Um,
But
the
yeah.
object of the verb. Yeah, not the object of the noun.
Yeah,
But
so what
the
we're
playing sports is the subject. Fun is the object. Gotcha.
yeah, so what we're doing here is linking this whole phrase, noun phrase, to fun. So you can think of it like we took play sports and then we add ing to make it a noun. So we have like the verb play, the concept of this action, and we have the object sports attached to it in the regular like verb way, and then we turn that whole thing into a noun.
Okay. Yep. So the first thing that occurs to me is like to play sports as a phrase. Um, if we have like to blah blah, the first or to ab is a. Can we always add or can we generally add like ing onto those things? Like that's I think that's just describing a different like structure with the same thing fitting into it. Um,
So you're talking about to play sports versus playing sports?
um, yeah. So playing sports is a um. Oh, actually, so I mean, playing sports sounds like a um doesn't sound like a noun. Um, is no, it's not. That's because it's a noun phrase.
Yeah, but it functions as a noun. It is a thing. It's the
Yeah.
concept of playing sports.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yep. In the same way that playing is a noun because it's the concept of playing, of play. Yep.
Yeah. So attaching a child to playing, sports is a child of playing. Attaching that does not change the fundamental role of playing.
Yep.
Just
Gotcha.
like adding an adverb like quickly would not change the basic role of playing and how it works. It's just adding stuff in its subtree.
Yep. It's restricting the set of various playings.
Okay, so
Okay, so
then the next type are participles. These are adjectives that are based on verbs.
okay, yep. I think I'm yeah. So
Yeah,
interested.
so yeah,
Because interesting would be the adjective.
so interest is a noun, but interested party, here it's being used as an adjective. Interested is modifying party. It's telling us about this noun.
Okay, so but interest. So interest as a noun, you'd say like the party's interest in this subject.
Yep.
Um, uh, that's describing like a well, yeah, the particular instance of like this idea of a thing being interested in something else. That's just a circular definition.
Yeah.
Um,
Actually, the party's interest, you're using interest as a noun because it's also a noun. Using it as a verb would be like chemistry interests me.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, that makes more sense. Um, so interesting in the second part, that's a gerund, right?
No, this one is a participle, even though it has the ing ending, because it is an adjective.
Okay,
Because
as in
it's
the root of, so interesting is not a, I mean the ambiguity because interest being both a noun and a verb, right? Um,
mhm.
but interesting, like my interesting book, um, or interesting book is, uh, so it's just because interesting is describing the book, um, that means that it's a participle. Whereas if it was a gerund, then interesting would be modifiable by adding another thing. So, because I'm thinking about like playing sports and interesting book. Um, how do I know that interesting in this case is used as a verb and not, or sorry, oh no, of course. So interesting book is an adjective because it's it's restricting the set of books, whereas
Yep.
playing sports is restricting the set of playing, um, as such.
Oh,
And
I see.
playing is,
Yeah, so you could try to read playing sports. You need context or to understand the meanings of words or something. It's the grammar doesn't 100% tell you how it works. You could
yeah,
think of playing as an adjective that tells us a type of sports, like sports that you play instead of sports that you watch. It would be an unusual
yeah,
usage
okay,
of the word, but it's not a grammar problem that's unusual. So you could think of it as playing sports, like the sports you play are fun. If sports was the subject though, and playing was an adjective, then the word would have to be are instead of is. It would be plural because sports is plural. So
yeah.
that's an example
So
of an extra clue that helps.
playing sports are fun. Is that yeah, because what we're describing the fun of all sports as opposed to the enjoyment of doing the thing. Um, that's the difference between the two, I think.
Playing
So
sports are
playing,
fun would mean the type of sports that you play are fun, which is
yeah.
odd because it's all of them. So it's like a weird category.
Um, so playing can be uh both a gerund and a participle, but in the first case,
Yeah,
well, yeah, obviously in the various cases. Okay, yeah.
I think so. The I don't know if this is actually in common usage as an adjective. Well, there's playing cards. That's a
Yeah.
that's a common adjective use.
Um, yeah, I sort of feel like that's definitely one of those cases where the two words have become their own noun, um,
Yeah,
as
they're
opposed to being, yeah, like, um, then again, no, because you can talk about lots of other cards, so that doesn't. I mean, they're sort of treated as a unit. It's more intuitive to think of them as a unit,
yeah,
but no,
they go
yeah, no, that
together,
is,
but cards works fine on its own because you can have like tarot cards instead of playing cards.
yep.
So,
I was just thinking about whether it's, how occasionally you'll get like a phrase or something, and then through, the next 100 years of language evolution, that phrase stays, but the rules that allowed for that phrase to exist in the first place have changed, so that, or that it becomes uncommon for anyone to construct similar phrases, but the phrase itself or um, sticks around because it refers to something particular that's useful.
yeah, so like this particular dictionary does not have an adjective for playing, but it mentions specifically playing card and playing field as two adjective uses for those phrases.
So that's probably more along the lines of what I meant earlier when I said that it's like the entire thing becomes a noun. I imagine that playing card would be a noun under
Yeah,
this
you
thing,
can
provided that's a single entry. Yep.
yeah, you can treat it as if you want, you could put playing card as a single node in your tree and just say that it has a space in it, but it's like a one word with a meaning.
Yep.
You can
Um,
do the same thing with proper nouns like the Hoover Dam. You can just put it as one tree node.
uh, yeah. I have an off-topic question about Magna Carta, but it's probably not important.
Okay.
Um,
So infinitives are harder and do more things. They
okay,
frequently,
harder,
yeah,
as in harder to understand, or
yeah, more
okay,
confusing,
yeah.
more complicated. They play more roles in sentences. They often have the word to in front of them, which one of its meanings is an infinitive marker. So, for example, to sit or to be.
Yep.
And they can do a variety of things, which we won't try to figure out right now.
So okay, yep. So it's a form of a verb. So to sit is still a verb as a unit. Um, sit is obviously a verb on its own, as is be. Um,
When you have the to in front, like to sit, it's not going to be a regular verb that leads a clause. Because you're not going to be able to
okay,
put
yep.
a subject in front of it. The to like prevents you putting a subject. Like you can't say John to sit.
So I want to sit. Like want is the main verb there, of course,
Yeah.
and the subject of, sorry, the object um is to sit because you're describing the desire of I. Gotcha.
Yes. So there, to sit is playing a noun role. It's a thing that you can want.
Um, but you only, I mean, I'm just trying to think of, like, you can want to do something, and that's particularly why it can be used as a noun in this case, because what you're wanting is the state of your doing that thing. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
something like that. So that's an example where it's a noun. The next example has it as an adjective. I made a request to see John. Does this one make sense to you?
Um, so I made yeah. So to see John is uh the adjective, and it's describing the request. As in a request to see John is like I made a blank request, or I don't know if it was
Yeah,
or yeah, or I made
yeah,
a difficult to understand request. Yeah.
yeah. So to see is the infinitive. It's modifying request. And then John is the object of see, because although to see is an adjective, it still has part of its verbness, so it can take John as the object. the thing to be seen, the thing that the seen action acts on.
Is it worth doing a tree structure here? I feel like it would help me.
Yeah, go for it.
Um, just remember where to. Oh, there we go.
So what I would recommend is take 2C and treat it as one node. Don't split the words up.
Okay, I'll do that to start with, and then we can.
Oh, that's not just a start.
Think.
That's my
Oh,
final general
always. Okay, yeah.
advice. It's not training wheels.
Okay, so I've really organized this bit poorly. Oh, I didn't need that, but I think that's all. Yep. So made is the root because oh, so and then so this feels like I don't know where to put A. Like I'm not sure if that's just
Do you know what
like
A gives you more information about?
yeah, so the request it's saying yeah.
Yeah.
So I made one request. So I mean order aside for these
Yeah.
subnodes.
The order's
I
not
mean
so important.
yep.
But
Oh no,
yeah.
of course, yeah. Well, it's only important if we're trying to reconstruct. Well, so I mean, if we had like, I guess, is it the case that like this section, oops, request is like, is there only one way to put that together, like that subtree, and that's why the order doesn't like the position of A doesn't matter because there is only one place to, or I mean, you could have like request to see A John. I mean, the capitalization is maybe an issue there, but
So
well, that's
when
the only other way. Well, except that would be like that.
yeah. So when a word has multiple modifiers, uh changing the order tends not to change the meaning. Like if a car is both red and big, um, you can apply the modifiers to the car in either order conceptually,
Um,
and you're going to get the same thing.
so I was wrong about putting John as a sub thing here, right? It is John's
Yeah,
a child of to see. Yeah, that makes it much clearer.
yeah. So you want to think about which verb is acting on John, or request actually was a noun, but it can be a verb, so it seemed like it could
Yeah.
have an
Um,
object.
whereas 2C is obviously the thing acting on John. We don't have it would
Right.
be
We
see
want
John,
to
so we don't.
see John, not make John or request John.
Yep. And John is the object if like in the as this comes to pass, John would be the object of seeing. So that is the object of to see. Is did we talk about infinitives and objects and subjects and stuff relative to them, or I'm not sure if I'm using the words correctly. That's why I ask. Um,
So yeah, object and subject can be used with verbals. Objects are more common.
yep. I have a feeling that what do you call it? If I tried to read this, like I, thought I could do it in 30 minutes, it would take a lot longer to actually understand this article if I was reading it closely.
Yeah, the article has a lot of information to unpack, and it will take some practice to get it so you remember it well and you can actually use it.
Yeah, I can definitely feel as we go over each concept, I can feel like my intuition getting better about how to explain or how to use them as ideas. But it's definitely I'm going to practice after this to make sure that I
Yeah,
actually remember it.
that was what I was going to suggest is going through the article, looking over it in more detail, trying to check if you have any questions or problems, and getting some practice. And just get however far as you have time for.
Yep.
Okay, and then that's probably enough stuff to do before the next session, is just this article. I think it's long enough, should be fine.
Cool. Is there any? No, there's nothing at the end, so it's full. Let's just looking at where the like the cursor percentage through the pages, not cursor, the scroll
Oh,
bar.
right here, yeah.
Yeah, just that you know how you'll often go somewhere and like a news article, and then there'll be a whole bunch. There'll be much longer than the article number of comments, and so your position in the
Oh,
page doesn't really tell you anything about the length of the document.
yeah, I
Whereas
get
this
what you
is
mean.
yeah, yep. All the exercises, they're all in the relevant sections, right? Yep.
Yeah. So I only have a few exercises. You might want more. There are many on the internet if you want more practice. You can also find them in the FI archives. There are discussion of the exercises from the article, and also people found and made up other ones and worked on those.
Mhm.
There's a lot of discussion of infinitives and verbals because they're harder than most of the other stuff as well.
Yep. Yeah, no, I feel like I mean, as there's a few times like throughout the conversation where I think I brought up do as one of the examples where I'm like as part of trying to figure out what the hell these things are, applying it to the things that I'm like seeing or reading or thinking, um, in the same way that like a message to the kid who called the other day was just from a video title. Um, I don't know if
Yeah.
is there much risk to taking random sentences from the world, in terms of if I don't understand references and things. I'll probably end up trying to go through the more of the
Some
article,
of
but
some of them are going to be too confusing for the tools you have right now.
mhm. Okay, yep,
So you might get stuck. You might run into hard stuff. English has a lot of special cases and weird things in it, in addition to advanced stuff we haven't gone to yet.
do you recommend analyzing your like my own language at this point, or should I wait till we go through a bit more, or I might end up confusing myself? Not necessarily about my language in general being particularly
Yeah, you could try it
cumbersome,
a
but
little and see how it goes, but I don't think
yeah, okay,
it's necessary yet.
okay, cool.
So another thing is to practice using the dictionary. It's not perfect, but it's often quite helpful. It often has information about things like different forms of verbs, and it will tell you whether a verb can have an object or not often, and it will tell you what different parts of speech a word can be, and you can find all the different definitions. So do can be
Yep.
a verb or an auxiliary verb, or a noun as in do's and don'ts.
Yep.
And you can look up that, and you can find out that can be a pronoun or a determiner or an adverb or a conjunction.
Okay, so that's interesting. I should probably pay attention in that I Googled that before, so I have it up on my screen at the moment. But it's
Yeah,
anyway, Google does
the,
not have the noun version or the conjunction, sorry. Oh no, wait, here it is. It's under adverb though. No, it's just indented because of the thing.
okay,
The
yeah. My understanding is that Google is using the New Oxford Dictionary, which is the same one I'm currently on.
so the ambiguity, this is probably, it's not very good on Google's part, but because this is indented, the fact that it was a conjunction is not obvious because the listen to this word thing is on the left-hand side, for me.
Oh, I see. It didn't
Uh,
come. Oh, I'm not on
but that's
Google.
you've got Bing.
Yeah, I changed my default. Oops, that is not what I wanted.
You might need a colon.
Yeah. Oh, this isn't too
You
bad for
don't.
me.
So, well, I've got one at the top. Okay, maybe hit the down arrow. The translations word origin. Yeah. Does that? So why do I have a thing there?
I don't know.
Um,
Different browser.
it's Chrome. So you've got Safari, right?
Yeah.
I'll put a screenshot in what do you call it? Discord so
Anyways,
you can see.
one of the things I wanted to give you was I have a bunch of bookmarks to different dictionaries because sometimes you'll find that the dictionary doesn't have the info you want or it's confusing or something. So I find looking at other dictionaries is pretty useful, including there are old dictionaries, and sometimes the old meanings of words is helpful.
Yeah, okay. Yep. So, like 1700s old or like earlier?
No, not they're not that old. There's like a Webster's 1923 and an 1828,
Oh, okay, yeah.
something
So,
around there.
uh, I mean, the sort of era when connections was often spelt with an X type thing. Um, I can sort of see that being useful. Off topic was where I posted it, if that was what you're looking for.
I'm
Oh
trying
no,
to
cool.
figure out if I can like drag a folder of bookmarks somehow. No.
Um, I don't know. I feel like you'd have to export it. Um, which I don't know about anything about exporting bookmarks. Um, Chrome and
I
Firefox would
did one
have.
of them.
Yeah,
I
okay.
believe that I pasted all the links somewhere. Okay, so here's the blog post for the grammar article. And oh, not there.
Are there any URLs that might be good to search your site for? That could work. There's do you have do you have a preferred way of searching your site, by the way? I often find it difficult to find stuff that I'm looking for.
Google site search.
Yeah, even that. I mean, I'm just misremembering things. Like a blog post that I haven't been able to find. I feel like you had a blog post at some point on inborn ideas, particularly, and the one that always comes up is I think Rand on nurture, but I don't feel like that was it, and I haven't been able to find it.
I sometimes just search the list of post titles,
Yeah, that
but
might be
it
better.
doesn't always work. But I can find a
Well, I
fair
know
amount of stuff that way.
Google doesn't have everything on it. Like searching for source code is the easiest way to see that. Like much of GitHub is not indexed by Google. We're not available via Google, so I'm not sure if there's a better search engine. But otherwise, yeah, the list of posts is probably the way to do it. Alternatively, maybe I should just like write a script to download every blog post of yours and grep it. That way, it's brute forcing, but might turn up other
Oh,
stuff.
yeah, you don't even need a script. Like there's plenty of apps to download a site.
Um, I find like downloading, like in this case, because it's so easy to reference your posts. I think it's probably quicker for me to write a script and let it run for 20 minutes than bother trying to find an app. Though I often make the mistake of thinking I can do something more quickly than the alternative, either modifying something else or making it from scratch. Um, in this case, it'd just be a bash script with a curl loop. Actually, I wouldn't use that. I'd use Python, but yeah. Anyway,
Okay, I'll find the dictionaries later for you. Um, I've found it useful to have several.
yep. That sounds good. Do the dictionaries listed at the top of the bar there is in all Nuox Web 3, etc. You can add
Yeah.
those yourself in the Mac thing, can you? Yeah.
You can if you get the files to do it. Um, if you want them for an app instead of just going to websites, talk to Justin. I hired him to get these dictionaries for me.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, I was just thinking you'd need some kind of like packed up archive of them. But I've looked for these sorts of things before, and I think I found something that was good. But I haven't had a dictionary app since using a Mac. So I should probably go find one and do that because it's way nicer than Googling it every time.
Yeah,
Cool.
okay.
All right. Um, should we leave it there? There then?
Yeah. All right.
All right.
Goodbye.
Ciao. I'll just read the dictionary stuff.
Yep.
I guess it doesn't matter. You can send them to me however you want. One question I did have that might be. Oh, actually, no, you don't. You're probably not familiar with Coinbase, so there's no point asking you whether you'd be willing to get an account. I'll send you the link, and but that would if we both had Coinbase accounts, it would let me send you money pretty quickly.